Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Steve Wagner, Global Managing Director of Decision Analytics over at Experian. Steve, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, let's talk about the recent Global Insights report. Found that there's been an increase in online activity and that the increase is holding steady. Do you think that we'll ultimately see a decline or this trend is going to continue?
Well, Jill, that is the real news that I think comes out of this study, which is that we've now measured this in 4 waves over 2 years, all the way through the crisis. And what we've seen is that this 25% bump in activity has been persistent during that whole time. So, what we're essentially seeing is that as businesses and consumers are feeling more economically stable, right? It is resulting in a persistence in that online activity.
And how about the impact of the pandemic on the consumer? And also, what about inflation?
Yeah, so I think inflation is a good one to call out as being a key from, falling out of the pandemic. Mostly what inflation does, I think, from the standpoint of our survey, is it's going to make the consumer a little bit less likely to be sticky with a provider. So customer loyalty goes down. And in fact, we've seen that in this most recent survey. We've seen that consumers, about 61% of them are willing to go back and be loyal to one of the providers that they've worked with in the past and pre-COVID pandemic. But that's dropped about 6% since we did the last survey. So whether it's inflation or whether it's the pandemic wearing off, what we are seeing is that lessening in consumer loyalty.
Which is so interesting because loyalty and trust were bigger measures in prior surveys. So it's interesting to see just how dramatic that shift was. What are businesses doing to respond to this shift in consumer behavior?
Yeah, well, the big watchwords in many areas right now for businesses in the digital world are making sure that you're lined up with the right analytics. So I'd say one of the biggest investments continues to be in analytics. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are strong plays still, and most of the businesses that we see that are catering to consumers are remain somewhat underinvested there and are continuing to pick up the amount of investment that they put in. Where do they put that? They put it into 2 places, right? They put it into, first of all, making that customer experience better and more seamless, right? And then the other thing that they put it into is fraud prevention. They want to make sure that they have the highest confidence in the transaction and that the consumers can have the highest confidence in the transaction.
Right. And Steve, what other trends do you think we're going to see emerge as we go back to business as usual or a more normalized environment?
Well, I think, look, consumers right now are ranking their top 3 priorities as security, privacy, and convenience. Remember what I told you already is that this 25% uptick in digital transactions is persistent. So, what I would say is consumers continue to be willing to give data if they think it's going to improve one of those aspects of the transaction. So security, that's the trend that I think we'll continue to see people focused on. How do they feel comfortable transacting?
Right, and you actually beat me to my next question because you and I have discussed this a number of times in the past, just how comfortable consumers are willingly to give their data. And it's so interesting, Steve, because it seems as if personalization and that experience from marketers to consumers really has been a key focal point, at least what I've been covering through this holiday season. So it's interesting to hear that you expect that to continue. So as we wrap up here, any other data points or trends we should be aware of?
No, I'd just say again, I think we are in the part of the cycle where generally the consumers and businesses that we surveyed are feeling more economically stable than they were a year ago. Now, there's some variances. This is a global survey. The US is much more confident than some of the other regions, but everyone is feeling a bit more confident, and still these trends are persisting. So that would be the headline.
All right, Steve, we appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks so much, Jill.